Welcome to Automation Ladies, the only podcast we know of where girls talk about industrial automation. So another episode of Automation Ladies. It's once again me, your host, Nikki. The other ladies are busy. Well, Allie's not feeling well today, and Courtney is working. She's got all kinds of robot stuff happening today, and I told him, no, don't worry about it, because this was actually meant to be my guest anyway. As you know, if you've been following the show this season, we're kind of doing a divide and conquer thing. We typically don't co-host episodes anymore. And this worked out really well because I actually happened to meet Dennis at the EPC show here in Houston 2 days ago in person. And we already had this scheduled. And I am now, kind of like on the 1 day post show trying to catch up on sleep and emails and all the other things. But a great time to have this conversation. Dennis is fairly new to Schneider Electric, I found out. 4 months in?
4 months, yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I think officially 4.5 at this point, but yeah, brand new.
Okay.
So.
Well, welcome to,
Thank
I
you.
guess, not that I represent them in any way, but welcome to the new position. It seems like you like it. Dennis was on a panel at the EPC show on my track, and then also I attended their hospitality party, which was super fun, and I got to make custom leather luggage tags for my kids with their names on it.
Oh, that's great.
And, they were super happy with that. We had a really great time. So thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to this. This is a standard episode. If you've been listening in we have kind of the Automate mini series happening as well in parallel to this, little 20-minute episodes. This is just the regular old series. And we're going to talk to Dennis and get to know all about his story and then what he's up to at Schneider. And we'll talk a little bit about the show and that sort of stuff. So Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I guess you told me this, but this is your first podcast episode, and I'm so honored to be your
first one ever. Yeah, it's been a week of first, definitely. I hosted that panel at the event we had on Tuesday, so that was the first there, and now my first podcast. So it's a week full of firsts for me. So
Sarah, who works for you guys in marketing, told me that I think you were like, oh, and I don't do public speaking. And she shoved you up on stage, huh?
Yeah, so it was quite funny. So I was probably 4 weeks in at Sarah Week, and she got me onto a panel.
Okay.
And then obviously I was on a panel at EPC and then hosted a panel at EPC. So I had to get on. I actually interviewed, she was one of my interviewers when I was interviewing for Schneider, and I had to tell her that, you didn't mention any of this when I was interviewing.
Better to ambush people with that kind of thing, I think.
Absolutely. So.
And I think more so what you have to look for in somebody to do that is just their kind of innate ability to talk about what they know confidently, rather than necessarily being the person that wants the spotlight.
Right.
So I think she probably did. It was maybe a good thing not to ask you in the interview if you wanted to do those things or if you do them, but rather just assess whether she felt like she could put you up on stage.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. not that I would have not taken the job, but it was like, I made because engineer at heart, right? And I don't mind public speaking when in a closed room with customers, but now getting on stage and it's a whole new world for me. So, but it's all right.
That's why we like to keep the show informal. I tell people you don't have to be nervous or prep too much, because you shouldn't have to talk about anything that you don't know well enough to talk about or want to talk about. So I'll start with our first standard question, and then we'll kind of take it from there, which is, Dennis, please tell us how you got into automation, and sort of like as much detail as you want to tell us about your career story, because we find it I just find it fascinating how people found out about this industry, how they decide to get the degree that they got, and then many people's careers in the industrial automation industry are not necessarily like a linear ladder type situation. And so I'd love to hear just how did you get to be doing what you're doing now?
Sure, definitely. It's definitely not, you're exactly right. It's not been kind of a step. It's been a lot of crossing over and around and a few circles. But so to go all the way back, so I graduated West Point with a mechanical engineering degree, served on active duty in the U.S. Army for 5 years, and got out. I started working for GE Energy, more as a project manager in project management, Six Sigma, stuff like that. Kind of progressed a bit there. I got out in the field. I was a field service person for a while.
Okay.
And then got hired by a power gen company, and did more project management there. But I was kind of at a point where I was like, I'm good at the project management, but it wasn't exciting. But one thing I really loved when I was doing field service, I loved being in front of customers.
Yeah.
I mean, I was actually co-located at a power plant, but it was fantastic. So I was like, all right, well, I had never really thought about sales. And so I was like, how do I get into sales? And so leveraging my knowledge of GE and power. So I took a job covering the GE Energy account for Alcoa.
Oh,
And so that was my first foray into sales. So I still, it tracked my career. I was really still in power at that point. And I progressed a few more roles in sales, more strategic accounts. In the power industry, I had a little bit of renewables, but then I got a job at Honeywell about 11 years ago, doing strategic sales, but in the automation space. So that was actually my first step into automation. So
okay.
that was about 11 years ago. Um, but yeah, I had a good technical foundation. So I was working at a power plant. Every one of those power plants has a control system, so I was at least aware of what it does, right?
Yeah.
And then so with Honeywell, then obviously I evolved. Now I know a heck of a lot more about automation in this automation space than I did when I joined. But that's how I ended up in automation, was kind of following a career of strategic sales, and which landed me into Honeywell. And I ran the Phillips account, ConocoPhillips, and then later on I ran the Exxon account globally. Then transitioned to regional sales leadership. And then, like I said, 4 months ago, took the role here at Schneider, doing something very similar to what I was doing the last 4 years at Honeywell. I was running the U.S. sales organization. So.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about what that position is and what are you doing now with Schneider?
Yeah, our team we're kind of organized by technologies, if you will. So I run sales for process automation. So Foxboro, Triconex, we do some Auticon, some of our Aviva software, but more in the process automation world. Then I have a peer who does the same thing, but for more of the industrial automation, more PLCs and drives and things like that. And then we have a whole other section of Schneider, which is all focused on electrical,
Yeah.
switch gear and the whole nine yards, which I'm still learning that portfolio. But the automation space, though, I run probably half the U.S. And I have a peer that runs the other half of the U.S.
Okay. Yeah, the process automation stuff is less like I know less about that because I've been more in discrete automation. I started as a machine vision sales engineer, and then I worked in pneumatics and motion control and things like that. And I typically saw factories, certain parts of factories, certain parts of the line. And part of why I love doing the show and what kind of I thought would be cool about it is to get to talk to all the different people that have different types of jobs in the industry, whether it's even automation specifically, but even within like a manufacturing plant. Because I realized I've been into a bunch of plants with like a very narrow scope of what I'm looking at and who I'm helping and what I'm there for. And then I was like, oh, there's so many other things that are going on around me that like I don't even really know about or how they work. And I'm a very curious person. My ADHD, I like to learn. Novelty is important to me and my brain, apparently. So like I, like you, could not do project management for too long.
Yeah, I was good at it, but it was like it got to a point where it's really boring. Like I really need to do something more dynamic. But
Yeah.
but
And
but you're right.
in this kind of thing, it's like, yeah, you have the same job for like what while, but your customers' applications and the challenges, like there's so
Yes.
much variety there.
Yep, exactly. And then just from a process automation standpoint, picture a refinery. So it's all about continuous process. So like you're talking about, a lot about discretes, like
Yep.
1 1 1 1. These are like a continuous process. At a refinery, it just is constantly flowing, right? They're going through the reactor, all the different processes there, but it's just like one end-to-end process where you get the crude in and some product out the back end, whether it's diesel or gasoline or whatever out the back end, but it's a continuous process all the way through. And that's where the what I do, what we call process automation. It's more around the continuous processes versus like a discrete process.
Yeah, I've learned enough or more about it now, having been also. So Allie is, like I said, not feeling well today, but she's really the process person out of
Okay.
the three of us. She's a chemical engineer that then went into controls,
Okay.
and she's done quite a bit of process stuff. And then she came up with it also from a like cross pollination kind of standpoint. She came up with this like training agenda that she wanted to put on, and we ended up putting it on as a conference. It's called OT
Okay.
SCADACon. And it is actually happening, if you're listening to this, July 22nd through the 24th here in Houston, south in Pearland. But the idea there is that there are, a bunch of people like us that kind of like are curious. We've got our niche of the industry that we
Right.
know or we have experience in, but we, don't necessarily touch all the other related technologies or things. And so part of the way that she wanted to do this is like, if you do discrete and you don't know about process, like you should have a clue, and you should know some people
Absolutely.
that do it, because
Yep.
depending on whether it's career related, like you may have an opportunity to go into that side of things. You may find that it sparks an interest that, what you're doing now doesn't spark for you, or, some people look for a change. And the other thing is if you're customer facing and you're helping people solve problems, knowing a bit about what is outside of your area of expertise,
Right.
but having a good like Rolodex of people that that may help support that, or just the general kind of ideas, I think it just makes you a more valuable partner. To
Absolutely.
somebody, especially like a customer or just your ecosystem in general.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to the Automate show next week for that exact reason, because I've got the process side down well.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know the industry players, I know how it functions, I know, delivery models and, features, benefits, all that. I don't know much about the discrete side, right? So, what makes a good PLC or a bad PLC? I honestly don't know that. So, one
Yeah.
of the things going to Automate next week is to contrast that, so I can learn that side, but also contrast that with the process automation side and figure out how do they go together. And if you think about, even I mentioned a refinery is one of the key customers of process automation, a DCS or safety system. They also have a ton of PLCs. They have discrete processes there too. So
Exactly.
so for customer coverage, I want to be able to support the customer end to end rather just in one little focus area.
Yeah, absolutely. It is hard to like know it all, but it's good to know a little bit, like enough to be dangerous, and then know who is the right person or who is the right team in your organization to then like support that problem or that process.
Yeah.
Have you been in Houston this whole time?
So I moved down to Houston about 5 years ago. I was actually living in Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
We had landed there 15 years ago. No, it was longer than that, 20 years ago. So raised the family there, but I took jobs where they didn't care where I lived. So that's even how I ended up at Honeywell. I was officially based in Houston since 2014, but I finally moved down in 2021 once my kids got through school and out.
Oh,
So.
okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so officially working here since 2014, but living here since 21.
I think, those sorts of jobs, and the same goes for me. I live in Houston, but my employer doesn't have an office here or anything.
Okay.
It's about, I think, sales in particular, it's usually as long as you travel to the customer, it doesn't really matter where you lay your head at night. It's going to be in a
Absolutely.
hotel a lot if you can handle that, right?
Yep. Yeah, I had a ridiculous amount of hotel nights when I was living in Kentucky because I was constantly here or elsewhere. And then finally, once the kids were out and COVID was done, it was like, okay, we're moving to Houston. I was getting sick of hotels at that point. So,
How are
uh,
you handling the humidity and stuff here? Are you happy with your decision?
I am. I mean, the humidity I don't have an issue with. The heat I don't have an issue with. You just make sure you do your if you're outdoor stuff, you do it from like 7 a.m. to 11, then go into air conditioning. The thing I'm struggling to get used to is the traffic. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to time everything right and get into the office. If I leave before 6, I'm pretty good. If I leave, 7 o'clock, it doubles or triples the amount of time to get to the office. So, but no, I love Houston, love Texas. But yeah, if there was a way to make the traffic go away, I mean,
My way of making the traffic go away is that I don't commute here to anywhere. In
smart,
fact, it almost
smart,
works better for me that we don't have an office here because I either am commuting to the airport or I am at home.
right.
Uh, because yeah, it is horrendous. And I got reminded of that this week going down to the Georgia Brown Convention Center for the EPC show, which is like a 45-minute drive. It's not bad, but it heavily depends on when I leave the house.
Right.
And then it's been crazy rain this week, flash flood warnings, which we get a lot, and I usually think nothing of them. And then, of course, this week, out of all the times we've had flash floods, a flash flood flooded my brother-in-law's car right in front of my house. So yeah, this morning was like, my daughter was like, "Oh yeah, mommy, did you know Uncle doesn't have a car anymore?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. He got towed yesterday by the insurance."
Wow.
But there's some unpredictability with the weather here, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and I took the option to stay down there because I didn't want to deal with the traffic.
I should have. I'm not the best at planning things in advance. It's not my best skill set, and I do try to I just have this mentality of trying to save money if I can. So yeah. But then I ended up having to take an Uber ride back and forth yesterday because my brother-in-law needed my car to pick up from school. So I don't know how much money in the end I ended up saving my company.
Right.
And then, yeah, it was crazy also because we have the World Cup stuff going on right now. So downtown is just crazy full of people.
Yeah, there was a game yesterday while we were having the conference. So yeah, it was, and an Astros game on top of that. So.
Yes, and on top of that, there was at the Hilton right next door to where we were, there was a women in electrical kind of conference. Okay. And so there were 1,500 women from the electrical industry at the hotel right next to us. And I think it's a joint conference by NAED, which is the National Association of Electrical Distributors. Okay. And the National Association of Electrical Representatives and the National Association of Electrical Contractors. Right. And they have a joint women's conference that I did not know about until recently. And it was funny because when we were at your hospitality party, somebody told me about it. They're like, I went to the Hilton and they were 3,000 lady electricians. I've never seen that many in my entire life. And I was like, oh, how cool is that? And then I got a message from one of my distributors. The automation manager is a woman, and she was down there. We tried to meet up, but it's crazy schedules with these conferences.
Yeah, definitely. So
I'm really glad we were able to schedule this conversation after, because a lot of people are like, oh, we're going to be at this conference. Do you want to do a live podcast? And it can be cool to do a live podcast at a conference, but there's so much going on and so many things to schedule. I think sometimes it's nice to just take a beat and then do this later.
Definitely. So what did you think of the conference? This is my first time going to it. Personally, I thought it was great. A lot of connections we made. This is our, Schneider was a headline sponsor this year. And it was Schneider's first time as well as my first time.
It was also my first time.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't have a point of comparison. I liked it a lot. I came there because of the power generation data center kind of connection. Okay. So I don't do a lot in oil and gas, although now having lived in Houston again for the last 4 years, I realize I probably should, right? Even if I don't do a lot of business personally day to day in that industry, it's the industry of the area. It is the industry also of just discrete manufacturing touches everything that we use all day. Right. Everybody benefits from the manufacturing industry. Everybody also benefits from and absolutely needs energy, right? So it powers everything that we do. And I think it would be, I don't know, irresponsible of me at this point not to learn more about it, get a little bit more involved. And I do have some, good connections and obviously business in the industry. And I happen to have this friend, Ben Seligson, who runs a podcast called the Energy Trade Show Podcast or something like that. With OGGN, the Oil and Gas Global Network, is a network of podcasts in the industry. And I don't know if he told me about it, but I figured out that he was going to be there podcasting. And so I wanted to come check it out. I just wanted to like go walk the floor, see this for the first time, see maybe what I could learn. And then it turns out that I introduced myself and so on. And then they asked me to chair the power generation track, which was really perfect for me because I wanted to go there to learn about that. And here I got the chance to introduce every speaker and be involved in like every panel and all the discussions in that.
Fantastic.
And I generally don't, when I go to shows, like it's hard for me to justify sitting in on every session in a particular track, for instance. Right. So this kind of forced me. This forced me to listen to every session on that track for 2 days straight, which was amazing for me because I got to learn so much and like hear from different people kind of talking about the same things. But the sort of overarching topic of that section right now is that, power generation demand is just going through the roof.
Yeah.
Powered primarily by AI data center demand. Yeah. These data center build outs. And they touch me on a day-to-day basis at work because we're selling a lot of HMIs into equipment that is going into the data centers or that goes into power generation. So for me, again, it's not critical for me to know everything about it, like the feed phase of permitting and things like that for data centers. That doesn't touch me as an automation vendor. But again, just being a person that wants to know more, be more valuable, be more able to make connections and, reason and just have the context of things.
Right.
It was really an incredible experience for me to get to listen to everybody from like the hyperscalers themselves that are building the data centers. And they're like, we don't want to be in the power business, but there's not enough power to go around. And so we have to listening to, the utilities talk about what their challenges are and what they need to do in order to be able to get this, power online and to these new customers while also protecting the ratepayers and people that live in these places. And then I think one of the things that really hit home for me was that, a lot of what we hear in the popular media and on social media about data centers and the power and water demands and things like that is just completely not true. Like, it's not necessarily coming from a credible source and based in reality. There's a lot of fear mongering and maybe misinformation kind of about that. And one of the examples I'll use is somebody sent me a TikTok video earlier this year about some guy talking about how, whenever you ask ChatGPT a question, it uses like so much water and I almost started to feel like, oh my gosh, am I irresponsible for even like asking, using AI? And then it was like, oh, if you're polite and you say thank you and it, uses more tokens, now you just, wasted an entire village's worth of water or something. It started to make me a little bit just uneasy about the whole thing. And then it turns out, our technologies are so much further ahead now. Yeah. Yes, we have old data centers that were not built for AI loads. They were built for, cloud computing and all kinds of other things like a decade or two ago that are inefficient and they do use a lot of water. But it's been, we've been developing this technology now for a long time. And these new data center builds, they're not using the technology that just hogs resources, and stuff like that. It's actually quite efficient. The cooling is pretty efficient by now. But yeah, it does, of course, a lot of power is required to power these giant computers and the, entire cities of them, essentially, that are living inside these data centers. But power generation was not something I knew too much about until this year, as I got some customers that are working on those technologies. And so that's kind of what piqued my interest. But it sounds like power generation is something that you've been involved with for a long time.
I was, yeah. So like I mentioned, my first 10, 12 years of my career was power generation. So I was, worked at a power plant. I sold gas turbine, and then I sold to gas turbine vendors, and wind turbine vendors, So yeah, I've been involved in power for many years up until really when I transitioned to Honeywell, so 11 years ago. That's really when it was, more oil and gas focused. But now with this power gen build out, and now that I'm over here at Schneider, we actually have quite a few installed base coal plants throughout the U.S. We do have a couple combined cycles, but given the boom, we are very focused on pursuits of, life extension of where we already are. We're even doing turbine retrofits on legacy turbines, gas turbines. And
Okay.
then even new builds. We're involved with several new build combined cycle plants. So our Foxboro control system, it's very versatile. So it can definitely go. It can go on a refinery. It can go on a gas turbine. It can go lots of different places. I mean, really, it's again talking about continuous process, right?
Yeah. So what are some of the new features and functions and technologies that that system brings to the table now that, back in the day when these things were being built last time around weren't available?
So I think the biggest thing is the availability of data and information. So, the old school of building a control system, it went from, a device to controller to on up. But it was very expensive because you're pulling wire and copper for everything, right? So you were limited by the amount of information you wanted to bring just by the cost of how much copper you had to pull.
Yeah.
Now with modern control systems, and being able to have different methods of capturing the data from a device all the way up. You now have all this information that's available that can then be fed up into the cloud or to the historian, and now the engineering team, and there's tools that they can use, AI, whatever, but now all this data is now available where they can then do a lot of optimization or predictive analytics on maintenance. So instead of, changing out a component just because it's been 12 months and I have to change it every 12 months, or it broke, what's the happy medium in there? Because you don't want it to run till it breaks, but
Yep.
you don't want to just change it every 12 months or whatever is prescribed just because. So you want to maximize the component life, and then replace it just before it fails. So now the data is available that allows you to predict when something is going to fail and have a much better maintenance plan. And then optimization of the facility, of the process, right? So now all that data is available through, APC has been around for many years. And so that has been kind of one of the first generation of how to do kind of real-time optimization. But now you actually have AI tools that are coming into play, and it'll be interesting to see how those evolve and how they get married into the control system and actually have like real-time optimization that's across, the entire facility, from power to process, that includes the entire facility. Historically the control, the APC has been around just the process, optimizing my process. But now you take into account the power side, and actually Schneider, since we own both sides, right? So we've developed EPMP, EcoStructure Power and Process. And so with that, you now have visibility across the entire layer. So you can optimize not just on the process side, but the whole entire plant, power and process together, because you now have all that data available to you. So there's a lot that's being enabled by modern control systems just because of the availability of data to
Yeah.
where you need to use it.
Do you have any idea of like how much percentage like optimization you can get as a just by the fact of you getting that information now into a system that can synthesize that? Like I feel like a lot of times when you have technologies like that where it's been kind of very siloed, right? And then all of a sudden you get the opportunity to connect them and run modeling exercises or whatever. Some things is like, oh, you can get like, I don't know, 20% more efficiency just by like
Yeah,
balancing.
I mean, I've heard a whole range of different numbers, so I'd hate to just land on one. But yeah, I mean, I've heard numbers in 20-30% of savings, and it depends on what you're measuring, right? So
Right.
I think one of the things like with the EPMP mindset is, okay, so rather than optimize your process, if your goal is to reduce your utility load, because electricity is a huge cost of these manufacturing facilities or these processes. Well, if I can optimize the electricity side, I may have huge savings come out of that plant and without even affecting the process whatsoever. So it kind of depends on where your focus wants to be, but with this availability of data, you can actually optimize the whole thing. So
Yeah. I think I also maybe remember you saying on this panel, or maybe it was somebody else, but with retrofitting a lot of these old facilities, like,
yeah, it was me, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're not changing the technology that the facility is running on, but if you upped, like, if retrofit the control system, now you start collecting this data. Now, all of a sudden, you have this huge window into the entire operation that you never had before.
Exactly, because as I mentioned, like the old control system, had, but we're not changing the underlying. You don't have to go turn screws and take out
Okay.
IO and all this other stuff because that's hugely expensive. But with the modern control system, we've actually developed it where it fits in the same slot, right, the same card slot, but
Okay.
now it connects to the modern controllers and it connects to the modern system. So now you have all of this available to you. Without the expense of having to do a complete rip and replace. So, but yeah, I did bring that up on that panel because I think that is bringing huge opportunity, especially to some of these legacy plants. The coal-fired ones, or even the ones that have converted to gas, but they're still traditional steam turbine plants, right? These were built, 70s, 80s, 90s, when control systems were old. You now have all this data available where you can actually optimize your power generation and find that, the most optimum efficiency for whatever load you're at. And I guess another point too is that now having all this data available, you can have a much, much better control and setting where your upper limits are. So traditionally you're like, okay, when you engineer it, you say, okay, here's the max limit that before this thing blows up. Okay, then you back off of that. You got your factor of safety, and
Yeah.
then okay, here's my upper alarm set point, and I can't go above that. Well, with more data available, you can get closer and closer to that edge without crossing over it to a failure mode. So you get much more production or efficiency or whatever it is you're looking for because you know more about your process now.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know in the compressed air world, which I used to work for Festo in pneumatics, we had an episode, this was maybe like 2-3 years ago, with a woman that she's like a PhD in pneumatics and she's all about efficiency. And she was telling me that like the way that pneumatic controls or the pneumatics are oftentimes spec'd, it's just kind of like you overspec it. And you do that for standardization and and you don't want to not have enough power, right? So enough air. And so it's just kind of like a general practice to oversize cylinders a bit.
Yeah.
And what they really don't think about, because back then it was also less important, power wasn't as expensive,
Right.
And things like that. But, you had less fidelity, I guess, in kind of the design. And so, but you end up with tons of wasted energy because it's using way too much compressed air and it really doesn't need to be. And then you end up with oversized compressors and they just like a kind of a cascading effect.
Absolutely. So with better information, better engineering, better design tools, you can actually get closer to what the real design limits are rather than the engineered design limits. I mean, I went through, got my degree in mechanical engineering 30 plus years ago, right? So back then it was, a finite element analysis. That was a newer thing. And, but yeah, you were still like, okay, you design it. This is what it needs to be. Then you throw a factor of safety or 2 or 3 or whatever on it. And so you're basically right away making it 3 times bigger than it needed to be. But again, as we become smarter and more digitization tools or more tools are available, I mean, we just get more and more exact with what's needed. I mean, it doesn't. You can't take the engineer out, but at least you still need the engineer in there to apply common sense. But now you have these tools that can help you get closer to that limit.
Yeah, they have more sophisticated tools so they can do a better job with what they've, with their time, right? Like you end up with more value out of that person,
right?
Applying their human judgment, applying what they've learned, but now having these tools that it give them also more information to work off of, right? I actually used to, this is not my episode. My career story is a bit varied. I worked for a company that did finite element analysis and mostly we focused on electromagnetic simulation. Okay. So taking a CAD model of something and then meshing it and running Maxwell's equations at every node of the mesh, and then seeing how that electric field is going to behave. And so it was used a lot for things like antenna design and optimization. Like think about in your iPhone, where do you put the antenna? What type of antenna? And depending on what the placement is, where are we going to get the best signal? And for components, like let's say capacitor placement. you used to go by these rules of like, okay, we have, we got to put this capacitor here and this one there. And maybe we do it again kind of on a, I want to just use the same one as much as I can. And so you maybe oversize some of them. This software would be able to, just take the design and run every scenario imaginable within some constraints and then give you kind of the Pareto curve, right? Like the optimal output. And there's always going to be trade-offs. What are you trying to solve for? What's the goal? What's the most important goal? And then you pick something, along the curve, right, of maybe performance versus price or whatever kind of your trade-offs are. But it was really, really cool to see somebody go from like a standard old design to then being able to simulate it and run these optimizations and this was when GPUs were just starting to like high performance computing being used, or it wasn't just starting, but it was just constantly getting better. So at that time, I think this was like 2012, we finally got to a point where you could use multiple GPUs and split a large model across multiple GPUs and then bring that information kind of back together. And so it was for the first time ever, we were able to simulate, for instance, like the lightning strike on an entire airplane.
Oh, wow.
And see like exactly how, when that lightning strikes, like how does that affect the components and the shell and all that kind of stuff. And then you can put a human body model in there to see how the human body is affected. Because we are obviously one large, like organic computer.
Right.
And this has always been kind of fascinating to me. But at the time I was like, man, there are so many things in this world that are so suboptimal because we don't have the number crunching ability or the ability to take in all of the factors.
Yeah.
And really run these intense, like computational processes to get to this end answer. Right. And now with AI, it's like the amount of information we can synthesize all at once to be able to do optimization. It's just astounding. And then, of course, that feeds into like we're building all these data centers because we all now want to use this AI.
Exactly. So it's a vicious circle.
It is. And part of me is like, oh, save the water and don't use the AI. And then like I just tried Perplexity Computer, and so like, oh man, why did I've been messing around with different models myself for different things. I use ChatGPT for one thing, I use Claude for something else because they're all good at, they all have their kind of areas that they're good at.
Right.
Well, then of course you have now just the ability, there's, sure, multiple platforms that do this, but that orchestrate all the different models together. And so to run a certain type of process, it'll be like, okay, I'll use this foundational model for this, and then I'll take that, and then I'll run it through this model for that. And it can do these like complex processes. I know a lot of people, like there's naysayers to all this and all kinds of doomsday scenarios about the world, whether it's our environment or our energy or, the ability of AI to destroy us. I'm just such an optimist and I'm so curious. And I find this to be such a fascinating time to be alive. But yeah, that's why like learning all about the power and stuff like that, like that just goes behind this. To me, honestly, I love helping customers solve problems, which is why I'm also kind of sales adjacent in what I do. Because I like bringing people the aha like moment if they didn't know that they could do this, or I solve a problem, like that's how I get my dopamine hits. But I will also say, like, just if I could go to conferences like that and listen to smart people talk about what they know about all day like that, like I don't know if I could get bored of that. As long as it's not the same people saying the same thing over and over. And some shows and some conferences, you realize you're like, okay, I've been here 3 times and people aren't saying anything new. So this is no longer interesting.
Right. So with EPC, again, it was all relevant to me because it was new. I don't know if they talked about the exact same thing last year, but I wasn't there. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so maybe we're definitely going back next year. We're excited. I'm excited about going back, but hopefully there is new relevant content next year. But I will say everything they talked about in all the panels, all the discussions, it was all relevant to what's going on today, the challenges we're facing, not just the power demand, but then, okay, we've got all these power plants that we need to build and all these data centers that need to be built and all this other stuff that needs to be built. The bottleneck was, and it still is really, gas turbines or the ability to get power, but there's also a bottleneck of craft labor. You've only got so many humans in this area. that can do the craft that they can do, like weld pipe or do whatever, pull wires, all these different projects are going to be competing for the same people to do the work to build the stuff. So it's
Yeah, some of the takeaways I really got to was things are also moving so fast, and there is so much demand for this power, and it's not going to stop. And it involves physical supply chain items like the turbines being the most visible. They're the biggest piece of the equation. They're the most back ordered item probably out of and what's going on. So there's also obviously people are using retrofit, old retrofitting old turbines, refurbishing, renting things, using bridge power, other things while you're waiting for your, order to arrive. But these are huge, like complex projects that involve the community, labor, they involve permitting, and, a lot of now with all this misinformation, some of these communities, like the counties, can have veto, right? So even if everything comes through, if people decide to have a community meeting and they hate this data center and they don't want it, they may just put a stop to it.
right.
So it's a very multi-dimensional problem to be solving. But the labor part is interesting. I mean, for a lot of different reasons. We've obviously had this skilled labor shortage already for a long time,
Right.
without the demand for this stuff. We've been, building a lot of logistics stuff over the last decade as everybody orders everything from Amazon, right? And I know a friend of mine runs a company called Ahava Automation, and she is a master electrician, and she does a lot of that type of build. And they're just crazy busy. They can't get enough people, right? And they're not even touching data center projects.
Right.
And they're already overbooked for this year. And then you have other things like this came up recently while I was at the PMMI Executive Leadership Conference. Mike Rowe was speaking there, and from Dirty Jobs. So he has a foundation.
Okay.
And he gives people scholarships to get educated, like blue collar education. And he mentioned the Blue Forge Alliance and asked, like, if in that room full of packaging people, if anybody knew what it was. And nobody did, except for, turns out I do. Because of my friend Drew Crow, who does a lot of education to communities about these jobs and why they should want to go into blue collar work and how lucrative it can be, and how it's a great pathway out of poverty, and just it's a career path that isn't glamorized very much, right? And I think for a long time we kind of told people not to do those jobs. And Mike, his thing, he told a story of when he was in high school. There was like a poster on his guidance counselor's wall that said like "work smart, not hard," and it showed somebody like working on a computer instead of with like, and then somebody with a hard hat. And the idea was like go into computer science and like don't manual labor. And we've overcorrected so much on that now we realize like crap, we really need
absolutely
people. And so he made a new poster and it says "work smart and hard," and it's a person with a computer and a hard hat.
Yeah.
Also, these blue collar jobs now are technology related. Even if you are, pulling wire or whatever it is, there's engineering involved. There's all kinds of tools you need to know.
Yep.
But yeah, the Blue Forge Alliance is an initiative. They need to hire thousands, hundreds of thousands of welders to make submarines for the Navy. And that's on the East Coast. So one of the things that they were mentioning, kind of like the Gulf Coast and Texas and like out to Louisiana, is really where a lot of the skilled labor exists for these types of power projects, right? Because we've had that energy industry down here for a really long time.
Right.
And then they were like, and so locating these data centers, you have to think about you have to think about the availability of power, you have to think about the weather, you have to think about how close you are to transmission lines, how close are you to gas pipelines, how close are you to water, but also how close are you to skilled labor? And I just thought about this while they were saying it. I was like, yeah, the skilled labor is down here, but there's a lot of skilled labor also like on the East Coast, and they have a lot of initiatives now where they're teaching this to people. But you're competing with other industries that also need
absolutely, absolutely. So it's definitely something we got to correct. And I do think I hadn't heard of that alliance. So that's great. But yeah, so growing up, my dad was a high school metal shop teacher, and so I learned early on, how to weld and work on a car and things like that. But through his classes, I mean, there were several local business owners that had created their own welding shops and things like that from what he taught them. So yeah, so I mean, you can have a great career, doing craft labor. I mean,
And
it's essential. Yeah.
especially now with this whole uh and I don't know, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that AI is going to take certain jobs away completely. I think it takes tasks out of jobs and then changes how those jobs work. Once an AI is capable of doing a task that a human used to do, like logically that human then directs the AI to do that task, unless you're in that very menial labor kind of job where you're doing something super repetitive that doesn't require any kind of human ingenuity or like thinking. But I don't know, I guess my take on it is more so that jobs will just evolve rather than disappear.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, AI can't weld pipe.
No, and those jobs will not disappear
Yeah.
anytime
Yeah.
soon. Now, the argument may be made, and I'm curious. I'm going to be curious as to what you think
Right.
going to Automate next week. One of the things that is brand new at Automate, because I've gone now 4 or 5 years in a row.
Okay.
And I kind of similarly was like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of like, ooh, super new. Like I've been seeing the same stuff, and we're kind of showing variations on the same demos, and they're getting better. But year after year, reporting on the show, I wasn't like, oh, this year just blew me away with something completely new.
Okay.
This year, there's a humanoid robot pavilion at,
Oh, wow.
sponsored by NVIDIA.
Okay.
And you should definitely go see it. It's actually very
Oh,
close to the Schneider Electric booth.
okay.
I am also very close to the Schneider Electric booth. So those of you that are going, definitely just go down the main aisle, the 2000s aisle. Schneider will be up on there on the left, and so will I with WinTech USA. And then just shortly after that, kind of towards the end, is the humanoid robot pavilion. But the idea there is obviously physical AI, and that comes in many forms, but tying AI with actual robots. And
Right.
what I've been talking about at Automate the last few years is more physical AI in the sense of like a traditional cobot robot arm that is maybe trained with AI rather than explicitly programmed. You
Hmm.
can tell it what to do. You can train it, without having as much programming ability or training, which is super cool. I think that kind of lowers the barrier to automation. And I actually talked to Jensen from NVIDIA earlier this year at a conference that was here down in Houston called 3D Experience, about that. And he said that he really sees that physical AI and the change from explicit to implicit programming as a huge unlock for smaller businesses that haven't been able to afford kind of the capital investment of specifically designed automation. If they can buy something that's a little bit more generic and it can function without being programmed for a specific job, that should really like unlock prosperity and productivity to smaller
Wow.
businesses even. Um, but the so that was kind of like how we've seen physical AI evolve in the shows over the last few years. The humanoid thing is definitely new. Like I have not seen many of them in person, and they're very like the capabilities are not there yet for most actual value commercial applications, but there's so much money being poured into them. Like I think it's inevitable they will get good enough eventually. It's all about the training data too, and then just the iterations, right? It takes a lot of companies have invested a lot of money building all the little components, like all the
Hmm.
little gears, and these are very different from kind of like the traditional automation components that we're
Right.
used to. But that will be something like completely brand new.
Okay.
And that is maybe the path. And I just have no idea how quickly we will be able to have a humanoid robot pulling wire or doing a
Yeah.
physical job that right now we're like, oh, there's no way AI can do this, right? AI can't dig a ditch. AI can't, do a lot of these, like they can't weld pipe. I mean, they can in some cases. My brother-in-law is a mechanical engineer, and he works for a company that makes welding bugs, and they crawl on the outside of a pipeline and weld automatically. Um, but what that horizon looks like, so right now everybody's like, get into skilled trades. You will have a well-paying career for a very long time. Um, but I'm not one of those people that likes to make predictions because I find that I'm usually wrong. Uh, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? How long do you think? And this is a completely unrelated topic to what you do and why you're here. But now I'm just curious. Um, from the mind of Dennis,
From the mind of
what are your
Dennis. Oh my
thoughts on that?
gosh. I'll be honest. I'm excited to see what the next 10 years brings. I mean, because the last 10, has been a huge evolution. But now we have all this AI, like you were talking about, all these different things. There's, in my mind, or I'm thinking there's got to be a consolidation into functionality, right? Getting it to scale to functionality, and possibly doing that welding pipe or pulling wires. I honestly don't know, but I think the next 10 years of evolution, if we're talking in 10 years, it's not going to look like anything that we're doing today. And how we get there and what it's going to look like, I have no idea. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, there's I mean, that panel that I was on, there's a gentleman at the far left, actually it was far right, it's my left, young gentleman. He was the CEO of a startup company, and I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
just
I remember him. He was
yeah, I
very
mean,
well, yeah, very well
brilliant,
spoken and like
brilliant. Yeah,
brought a lot of good insight to that panel.
yeah. So I'm looking for, like, okay, who's the next Elon Musk or whatever? Who's the next one that's just gonna completely invert how we're doing things. Even from the automation world, I mean, we've been on the Purdue model since, for the past 40 years, right? And it was done for, reliability, security, everything. But there's going to be one of these people that are probably in college now or even high school now that completely reinvent everything, and it's going to work. And so I'm waiting to see who that person is and what it's going to look like. So, I mean,
I think
the
we have a
evolution is good.
tendency to use our past experiences to try to predict the future. And I
Yeah,
think in our industry, things have been so slow to like we don't have a lot of leap changes. And it's part of because when you're operating a plant, you can't like overhaul everything all the time.
right,
It has to be super reliable, it has to be proven. Like so you don't jump into innovation too much and too quickly in the type
right.
of industry that we're in and when it's safety critical too. You can't just be playing around with like the coolest thing that you can think of. It's like it has to be very proven, reliable, and work. Um, but I think we pigeonhole ourselves a little bit by constantly using that. Well, I've seen it all, and it's not going to work, and so I'm not even going to go there. And like you said, there's some student out there that hasn't been told it can't happen, hasn't been told it can't be
Right.
done, and they are going to blow us out of the water somehow.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess we're getting close here on time, but do you want to talk about software defined automation? Because I feel like that's one of the things that I hear so much coming out of Schneider Electric.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely spend a couple minutes on that. So Foxboro has been our control system for many, many years. Rock solid, tried and true. It's a great control system. So this is the next evolution of that control system, and it's still under the Foxboro umbrella, but Foxboro Software Defined Automation, Foxboro SDA, and I believe personally that this is kind of the next phase of, unless somebody else reinvents the whole thing, but as our vision,
Yeah,
this is the next evolution in process automation. And it's really creating kind of an open architecture, if you will. So it's still going to have design standards or design guidelines to make sure it's still rock solid, still the same reliability or higher reliability, but there's an openness to it, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to run on our controller. It doesn't have to run. It can run our controller, but it could run somewhere else. Or you can introduce third-party software in that environment, that to get the best of that software, and it runs seamlessly. And I'm not hugely technical on software and how that works, but from what I understand, you can containerize the software and then create and it runs in the system. It's got parameters to keep it secure and safe. Yeah, like an iPhone, right?
yeah,
Each app has a standard, and it has to meet the standard of security and all that, but it runs. So I do see that taking off as next evolution. A lot of automation companies are saying, "Hey, we're software defined." The key in there is open.
yeah,
Are they really open? My prior company, yeah, they do software defined automation, but as long as it runs on their own controller.
Yeah, as long as you buy it from us.
Exactly.
And I
So
will say, going through the supply chain issues during COVID
yeah,
really gave us a flavor of why I think this is also so important. Because when you're constrained completely, held kind of like to one piece of hardware, one vendor,
yeah,
if they have an issue in their supply chain, and there's a number, I mean, tons of different reasons and different ways that supply chains can be disrupted. Right now, we have an issue with chips because there's so much demand for chips for AI. People are basically, A, they're getting more expensive. B, it can be hard to even buy them if you're not a high priority customer. You don't have a lot of good relationships directly. We saw this with certain material shortages during COVID. If you were a vendor that white labels a bunch of stuff, your manufacturer is going to sell to their own customers first before they give you the product to sell it white label to your customers.
yeah,
And so in critical industries where you can't just sit around going, oh, well, my item is back ordered for 2 years, or I don't know when I can get one.
yeah,
You have to do something. And so that is, to me, when it was like the first time that for me it kind of clicked, like really, like we have to do something about this, because we can't control everything in the world. We can't control geopolitics. We can't control, the weather, right? And the supply chains for our automation stuff are complex. They are worldwide. They require materials that, we can't get easily here, for instance. So, reshoring and everything is really great. But you can't reshore materials that aren't available here. For instance,
right,
like if you don't have a source of a metal, you can't
right,
mine for it where it doesn't exist.
yeah,
Then the idea that, you can kind of decouple the software from the hardware in a sense that there's more flexibility. You can
yeah,
architect systems that are a little bit more open. And I'd say from, selfishly from my side as well, you may want to be able to source one of the components of a system from a best in class manufacturer rather than have to go from, hey, I got to go with one company that does everything, even if this
right,
part of it is not their expertise, or it's not really where their, center of excellence is. That's not really where they care that much about it. And then as a customer, you can kind of look at, okay, or maybe it's production capacity, right?
yeah,
So that I think is really cool. I've been a fan of the idea and how you guys are executing it since I did a demo of EcoStruxure Automation Expert last year
okay,
on our show. And they showed us it was pretty mind blowing and pretty cool how like reusable, how the design, how quick the design is, and then how you can run it on these different things. So I'm glad to hear that kind of extends across. I just didn't know too much about your DCS, in your
yep.
process.
Yeah,
Portfolio.
so Foxboro SDA is actually using EAE as the engine, right? So it's similar, but it's more of a full-on DCS, and I do want to caveat that we are not walking away from our Foxboro brand in any way. I mean, it's what we've sold for the past 30, 40 years. We continue to support, and we will all support that forever, just with modern technology. This Foxboro SDA is really just the next step in that evolution. So it's not, we're still 100% supporting what we already got out there.
Well, I think that's also really important because again, you can't force your customers to change.
Exactly.
Like we all know, if it's working, they're gonna keep it
Right.
until it's not. Or, just the life cycle of the ability to upgrade or change these things, it can be
Yep.
in the decades at this, in these certain industries. And so, I agree. It would be very irresponsible as a vendor to say, "Oh, we have a new thing now." Like,
We're done.
everyone
So,
can buy it, or or you're on your own.
some of my competitors actually do that, but we're not doing that in any way. And we have we have a history of supporting our installed base, and we will continue to do that in the same way we've always done it. So.
And I respect that a lot. I think it is really important. We don't, we try not to talk negatively about anybody on the show, but I certainly have, certain principles and things that I think are important in how you support a customer, how you bring technology to the table, how you can be a good partner. And I think that those are all, some of the reasons that I've been pretty impressed with everybody and everything that I've seen from Schneider Electric in the times that we've gotten a chance to talk and get to know people. So we're coming up here on the end. I'm going to ask my last question. Well, I guess I'll ask you first. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
That's a good
before I
question.
ask you my last question?
No, I think I'm good. Bring it on. Last question.
Okay. So my last question should be an easy one for you, but tell people if they want to know Dennis Ganson, if they want to do business with you or they want to learn from you, where should they find you and follow you other than our website, automationladies.io? You will have a guest profile that should have some links. But tell people where they should find you. And then if you have anything exciting or noteworthy coming up that you want people to be aware of.
So, where to find me? LinkedIn probably is the best place to find me. I am on there. Obviously, Schneider Electric, we got our website and all that. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me directly, LinkedIn's probably the best way to get there. And sorry, you had a part two of that question.
Yeah, where if there's anything that you have coming up, like conferences, talks, events, some people are like, oh, I'm releasing a book next month. So I'm just giving you the open opportunity to plug anything you want.
Sure. God, I wish I had the date in front of me. So in August, we have Automation Days South, which is I would love to see many customers or potential customers to come. We have it hosting it in San Antonio, Texas, at the JW Marriott. So on the north side of San Antonio, and I don't have the dates off the top of my head. I know it's in August.
That's okay.
So,
well, in August, we'll go ahead and try to make sure that we have a link to that in the show notes. Okay. So if you're listening to this and you want to know the exact dates and you want to find out, how to register, how to get involved, we'll have our team put a link in the show notes for that event. I'd love to try to make that actually. That's a drivable event for me to go to.
It's only 3 hours from here. Yeah, it's great.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for braving your first podcast. I hope it was a decent experience.
It was good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been fun. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, and I will see you next week at Automate.
Fantastic. I will see you there.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Automation Ladies. If you like our content and you want to stay in touch, please connect with us on LinkedIn, follow the show page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can send us a message or a coffee on our website, automationladies.io. We look forward to getting to know you.